Hello my dear friends, welcome back. Or if you are new here, I'm really happy you found your way to this little corner of YouTube. I want to start by saying thank you. Whether you've been here since my first video or you're just dropping in for the first time, I really appreciate you being here. And if you'd like to paint along today, I'll mention all the supplies as I go, and I will leave a complete list down in the description for you. And for those of you who just want to sit back, relax and tune out the noise of the world for a while, you're more than welcome here too. You know, it's funny how inspiration finds us. The other day, I was at the science fair with my family. Crowds everywhere, so much energy. But honestly, we started feeling a bit out of place there. So we slipped away, took a walk along the Stanford campus and drove to Kuldaeva Road. And suddenly everything was quiet, just us, the breeze, and these wild lupines blooming along the roadside. That's where today's painting really started. Okay, let's begin. I'm starting by sketching out the scene you're seeing here, those lupines along the roadside. I like to keep my sketch pretty loose, just enough to give myself a roadmap for the painting. This video is actually divided in two parts. I'll be painting the same scene on two different watercolor surfaces. First up is a piece of hot-pressed 300 pound cotton paper that I tore from a larger sheet. Later, I'll paint the same wildflowers on a rough surface. The idea for this little experiment actually came after I finished sketching the first version on 120 pound cold-pressed paper, without recording myself. I started wondering how the flowers would look and feel on different papers. And, well, here we are. As I sketch on this hot-pressed paper, the first thing I notice is just how smooth the surface feels. There are a few tiny lines here and there, probably picked up from being shuffled around in our house for a few months. You'll really see those show up once I start laying down the color. Some people find that a bit annoying, but others kind of like it. Hot-pressed paper is known for the smooth finish. There's almost no texture, so your pencil just glides across it. That smoothness means the paint mostly sits right on top of the paper rather than soaking in. As a result, colors tend to look a lot more vibrant and crisp once they dry. If you love bright, clean washes or want your colors to really pop, hot-pressed is a great choice. On the flip side, this surface dries pretty quickly, which can be a challenge. If you are not working fast enough, you might end up with some hard edges that are tough to soften later. It's not as forgiving as cold-pressed or rough paper if you want to blend or lift color after it's dry. So if you like to work wet into wet or enjoy softer, more blended effects, you might find hot-pressed a bit tricky. Hot-pressed paper is really popular with illustrators and botanical artists, or anyone who wants to get super fine details and sharp lines. Think pen and ink or really precise watercolor works. It's also great if you plan to scan your artwork, since the smooth surface means you won't get a lot of texture showing up in your digital files. On the other hand, if you love that classic watercolor look with granulation and texture, or you like to layer lots of washes, you might prefer cold-pressed or rough paper instead. So it's really about what kind of look and feel you're after. I like using hot pressed when I want my colors to stay bold and when I'm focusing on details. But it's definitely a different experience than working on a textured surface. Let's see how these lupines turn out on this paper. working on this first sketch, I find myself settling into that familiar sense of calm that comes with painting. It's a kind of quiet that I really look forward to, especially after busy days of crowded places. Actually, this reminds me of something I read in Susan Cain's book, Quiet. You know, I've realized how much I rely on these quiet moments, not just for painting, but for thinking, recharging, and just being myself. And if you ever felt the same way, I want you to know there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. In fact, Susan Cain's book, Quiet, really helped me understand this. She explains that some of us are simply wired to thrive in stillness and solitude. It's not about being shy or antisocial, it's just how our brains work. We actually find our ideas, our flow, and even our highest performance when we have space to be with our own thoughts. As you watch me lay in the first wash, I use yellow ochre to set the tone for the tree line and foreground. Yellow ochre is an earth pigment. It brings a warm, sunlit feeling to a scene, and using it as an underwash helps suggest that bright sunny day I want to capture here. I let the sky color gently mingle with the yellow ochre and then move that bead of color down the page, covering most of the surface but intentionally leaving some areas white. Those untouched spots are where I'm planning to add some vibrant poppy flowers later, and they'll also serve as natural highlights to keep the painting lively. Next, you'll see me mix permanent green olive with burnt umber. This is a trick I picked up through experimentation recently. When you add an earth tone like burnt umber to your greens, you get a much more natural, muted results. It helps avoid harsh artificial greens that can sometimes sneak into landscapes. The end result is quieter, more believable green, perfect for suggesting the subtle, earthy tones you actually see in nature. You'll notice I use burnt umber a lot throughout this session. It's such a versatile color, great for mixing, deepening shadows, and adding warmth and depth to almost anything in a landscape. And if you have your own little tricks you want to share, please do so in the comment section below. I enjoy reading all of your comments and answering any questions you may have along the way. Dear friends, as we're laying down our first wash, please do not worry about the end results. First wash is usually very forgiving, especially on cold-pressed and rough surfaces. Regardless of the type of paper, I want to relay to you that when I'm not worrying too much about the results, instead thinking about how much I love wildflowers and being in nature, and how much I want to paint at least a glimpse of that beauty on paper, that helps me not to be tense or stressed out about my work. You maybe notice I don't edit out the little hiccups or happy surprises along the way. Everything you see here is how it actually happens as I paint. Wins, mistakes and all. My hope is that by sharing the real process, you'll pick up a few little tips, maybe avoid some of my missteps, or even discover something new to try in your own work. Here you saw me dropping Ultramarine Finest right into Opera Pink to start building up the lupine flowers. I'm not overthinking how the colors mix on the paper. I'm just letting them do their own thing. Sometimes the best effects in watercolor happen when you step back, and allow the paint to flow and mingle naturally. And here, please allow me to tell you something I've been thinking about often. I hope with this video I'm able to relate to you that painting with watercolors doesn't have to be stressful or intimidating. Over the years, I've had my fair share of paintings that didn't turn out the way I imagined. Plenty of moments where things just didn't work or where I hit a creative block and felt stuck. But honestly, that's just part of the process. You'll probably feel frustrated at times, and that's completely normal. The important thing is to keep coming back to it, to let yourself experiment, and to be okay with those little setbacks. Watercolor has this way of pulling you back in with its unpredictability and beauty. You just saw me using various playful techniques to suggest grasses. As you see, I'm being very playful here when it comes to watercolor, and I hope you'd allow yourselves to be playful with your paints too. And I feel like the more you paint, the more you'll start to trust the process. And before you know it, you'll find your confidence growing, both in your painting skills and in your own creative voice. So if you are feeling stuck or unsure, just remember it's all part of learning. Let yourself enjoy the process, celebrate the small wins, and don't be too hard on yourselves when things go sideways. And as I watch the colors blend and settle into the paper, I am reminded of how peaceful this whole process can be. There is something about painting, especially in watercolor, that invites you to slow down and just be present for a while. I think that's one of the reasons I keep coming back to it. Sometimes it's easy to forget, with how busy and noisy life can get, that some of us really need these quiet moments. Sometimes stepping away and giving yourself permission to just be still is exactly what you need to recharge and find inspiration again. You know, while I'm painting and talking about the value of quiet, I want to share a few things that have genuinely made a difference for me. There's actually a lot of science behind the idea that quiet time isn't just a luxury, but something our brains and bodies really need. One of the simplest ways to make the most of a quiet moment is breathing. Just taking a minute or two to focus on your breath, feeling your belly rise and fall, or noticing the air as it moves in and out can help calm your nervous system, lower your heart rate, and bring you back to the present. If you want to try it, just pause and notice your breath for a few cycles. It's surprisingly grounding. Another thing that works wonders is mindful walk, especially out in nature. When you are walking, you can tune into your senses, noticing the things you see, the things you hear, and the things you feel or smell. This kind of sensory check-in is a great way to anchor yourself in the moment and let your mind settle. Journaling or doodling is another evidence-based way to use your quiet time. Creative activities like drawing or writing and a journal don't just help you process your thoughts, they are also linked to lower stress and even better your sleep. Plus, art itself is a form of mindfulness, and it can boost creativity by helping you to let go of self-judgment and just explore. Or if you're just looking to relax, even sitting in silence for a few minutes, maybe with a cup of tea or just listening to calming music or nature sounds, can help reduce stress and improve your mood and focus. So if you ever feel like you need rest, these are all simple, research-backed ways to make your quiet moments even more restorative. And before we move on to the next piece, you'll see me reaching for a piece of cling wrap. I was in that deep flow state and just thought, why not see what happens? I really enjoy adding a bit of randomness to my process sometimes. Those unexpected moments lead to the most interesting textures and patterns. I'll let the cling wrap do its thing while the paper dries, and I won't pick until the very end. It's always a bit of a surprise. And I'll show you the results once everything is fully dry. Moving on to painting the same scene on a rough 300-pound Arches watercolor paper. I want to talk a bit about what makes working on a rough paper unique. First off, this paper has been sitting on my shelf for a while, but it's still in great shape. If you're storing watercolor paper, especially in a humid climate, it's a good idea to keep it somewhere dry and out of direct sunlight. That way you avoid issues like mold or paper warping, and your paper will be ready to go whenever inspiration strikes. Rough paper, like this Arches sheet, really lives up to its name. The surface is highly textured with pronounced peaks and valleys you can actually feel. This texture gives your work a lot of character and makes it ideal for expressive, bold painting styles. And when you lay down color, you'll notice how the pigment settles into those grooves, creating beautiful granulation and organic effects that you just can't get on smooth papers. Also, one of the big advantages of rough paper is how well it handles wet into wet techniques and glazing, and the deep texture allows for more dramatic washes and makes it easy to create interesting textures with dry brush or granulating paints. You'll also find that rough paper tends to stay wet a bit longer than hot pressed, giving more time to move paint around and blend colors. That said, rough paper isn't for everyone because of its strong texture. It's not the best choice if you want to do highly detailed work or fine lines, the paper's tooth can make it hard to control tiny brushstrokes. But if you enjoy a looser, more spontaneous approach or want to capture the raw, lively qualities of watercolor, rough paper is a fantastic option. I find it especially satisfying for landscapes and scenes like this, where I want the natural texture of the paper to add to the feeling of wildness and movement. So, as I start laying down color here, notice how the paint breaks, granulates, and settles differently compared to the hot press paper. Here is what we have done so far. I started with the first wash, mostly working wet on dry, just gradually moving the pigments down the page. As I worked my way down, I shifted up the colors and suggested a tree line in the background, and then some grasses as I got closer to the foreground. While everything was still wet and lively, I started adding those pops of pinks and purples, mixing opera and ultramarine. And for the poppy flowers, I just dropped in some pure scarlet red, right into those damp areas. You can really see how different rough paper behaves compared to the hot pressed. The pigments move and mingle so much more freely on the textured surface. It's like the paper just welcomes the color and lets it do its own thing. For this piece, I decided to skip the masking fluid. I just felt like it might be too constraining here. I wanted to let things flow and stay loose, and rough paper really encourages that kind of approach. Today we experimented side by side, painting the same flower scene on top of hot-pressed and rough watercolor papers. Each paper brought out something different in the work. Hot-pressed paper, with its smoothness and vibrant colors, invited crisp lines and quick decisions. Rough paper, on the other hand, welcomed bold washes, granulation, and unexpected textures, letting the pigment settle and mingle in the ways that felt organic and alive. I hope you saw that there's no single right way to approach your materials. Each choice brings its own magic. And sometimes the best discoveries happen when you let go of expectations and simply play. Along the way, I shared my process with all the little wins and missteps included. I truly believe that painting, especially in watercolor, doesn't have to be stressful or perfect. It's normal to feel stuck or frustrated sometimes, but if you keep coming back to the page, you'll find your confidence and creativity growing. The unpredictability of watercolor is part of its beauty. It teaches us to let go, to adapt, and to appreciate the surprises. session, we've talked about the importance of quiet moments, not just for art but for life. If you find yourself needing stillness or solitude to recharge, know that you're not alone. And as I recently learned, mindful activities like painting, journaling, or even a peaceful walk in nature can help us reset, find flow, and spark new ideas. There is real strength in honoring what you need and making space for those restorative pauses. And before we start wrapping up, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here with me today. Your presence, your comments, and your willingness to share your own journeys mean more to me than I can say. I hope you'll feel inspired to pick up your art supplies and paint something that catches your eye. It could be anything, a wildflower by the roadside or just the colors of a quiet afternoon. Please share your thoughts or even your suggestions for future sessions. I love hearing from you and hear what inspires you. Thank you for being here with me today, for painting along, and for making this community such a welcoming and creative place. Until next time, please keep noticing the beauty in your world and let yourself be surprised by what happens when you give your creativity a little quiet space to bloom.